Hey, it's me, Teller. I'm tuning in to give you a recap on our missing episode. Due to horrendous technical difficulties, episode 4 remains lost to time, or until someone with any editing skill whatsoever can figure out how to salvage the audio, because like my voice was duplicated and it was horrific. I started recording there. My job is to fill you in on everything important that took place with no assistance whatsoever from the rest of the cast, because they're off doing better things. Last you had left off with a massive storm on the horizon. The crew of the Mischief immediately began to take action to brace the ship for the incoming inevitable impact with a gigantic twister that had begun creeping its way from the cloud cover below them. The crew quickly focused on raising sails and locking themselves down to the ship with a series of ropes and latches that had been built into the deck of the ship. Karsa stayed above board to assist the crew, while the rest of the party either remained below deck or quickly made their way there. It's somewhat easier for a moment to explain what each character did independently, so I'm going to do that. We're going to start with Karsa. While attempting to assist the crew, Karsa noticed that Raven Lewis, one of the crew members, was struck with some of the rigging and knocked unconscious. They quickly started to slide off the side of the ship, with only her rope securing her to the deck of the ship. Egbert the Aarakocra immediately flew to lend assistance. As Karsa ran forward to assist with securing Raven, he noticed that the rope securing Raven was partially cut, as though someone had purposely cut it. Karsa managed to haul both Raven and Egbert back into the boat and secured himself to the Mischief to brace for impact with the storm. Karsa saw, as the front of the boat made impact with a twister, the pile of kobold bodies that had been left on the deck from the previous incursion started to slip off into the wind, and Egbert was dragged by his wings into the storm. Before the corpses slipped off the deck, Karsa noticed a black ooze from the tattoos of one of the kobolds slip off and tendril its way into the ship. Karsa shouted this to the rest of the crew before doing his best to pin Raven and himself to the deck to prevent both of them from being sucked in the vortex. As the vortex passed overhead, Karsa saw a gigantic portal manifest above, through which he saw a magnificent floating marble palace populated by giants being assaulted by Jinn and other air elementals, as well as a gigantic bird seemingly made entirely of lightning. This gigantic lightning bird launched massive lightning bolts into one of the castle towers, causing it to explode in a burst of marble and giant viscera. Karsa was just able to make out some of the words being screamed by one of the giants as before the portal closed and the connection with the other side was severed. Seeing as he had just recovered from a near-death experience, Simuel decided the best course of action would be to return to his quarters to attempt a moment of rest. Simuel noticed members of the crew attempting to lock down some of the cannons and struggled to assist. Once that had been accomplished, Simuel rushed over to Alfred, who asked Simuel to knock his dresser over in his bedroom. When asked if there was a certain way the dresser should be placed, Alfred insisted that the doors be accessible. Simuel pushed the dresser over, and the dresser flopped over with the doors facing the floor, much to Alfred's dismay. After being chastised by Alfred, Simuel watched as Alfred flipped the dresser himself and closed himself inside. Simuel placed a crowbar in the handles of the dresser, preventing Alfred from leaving in an act of what we can all agree was petty spite. Simuel decided to return to his bed in an attempt to get some sleep and recover. This did not last long, however, as Simuel's symbiote woke Simuel from his slumber by telling him that one of the symbiote's siblings was on the ship. After rushing out of his room, Simuel noticed that V3PO had been forcefully torn out of the back of the ship, with a gigantic hole now being present in the brig where the robot had been located. Edward went below deck. After checking on Simuel and Alfred, and assisting Simuel lock down one of the cannons, Edward returned to his quarters. While inside his quarters, Edward observed a fiery portal open up and slip a small white envelope onto his desk. Edward read the letter it contained within, which simply stated, "Congratulations on your promotion," which quickly ignited into the shape of his new familiar, an imp. After taking diligent notes on the macabre scene unfolding on deck, Alfred returned to the party's quarters to prepare his room. Alfred insisted on loading his dresser with a variety of soft and comfortable objects to fashion a makeshift coffin in which he intended to ride out the severity of the storm or die in it. He then called Simuel into his room to assist him. After the dresser was placed appropriately, Alfred placed himself in the makeshift casket and closed the doors. Once he was secluded in the quiet and comfort of the dresser, Alfred detected strands of arcane energy beginning to gather in the air around them. Alfred, having a choice to either coalesce the energy or just leave it be, chose to focus the energy, crystallizing the energy together and manifesting the portal that Karsa had observed in the wind tunnel before. Once the energy had dissipated, Alfred began to hear the sounds of something crawling on the outside of the dresser he was lying in. Edward and Simuel rejoined each other in the hallway, with the symbiote shouting at Edward to be quiet, as Simuel and the symbiote had been searching for the second symbiote located on the ship. Simuel explained that there was another creature like the one inside of him located on the ship and asked Edward to help him find it. Edward ran down into the basement of the ship with Simuel, where they found Remington in front of the gunpowder stash. Upon detection, Remington's body began to stretch and distort into a thin, black, shapeless form composed of black ichor. It screeched at the pair before slipping through the wood of the ship and back into the floor above. With the storm having passed over, Karsa returned to below deck. Karsa heard Alfred call for help, as well as Simuel and Edward calling for assistance even further below. Karsa ran to assist Simuel and Edward, determining that this was probably the more urgent of the calls. Alfred heard footsteps outside of his room and decided to investigate. Cleverly, Alfred decided to cast dancing lights in the shape of his body where he'd been hiding, in hopes of drawing whatever else was on this floor towards attacking his duplicate instead of him. This gambit was successful, as a creature attacked the lights and didn't notice Alfred hiding in the dresser. The creature left the room shortly after, attacking the next person it could find in the hallway, Yorick. Seeing Yorick had been attacked, Alfred conjured a cloud of daggers to block the hallway, and Yorick, seemingly oblivious to the conjured death hovering in front of him, walked directly into the cloud of daggers towards Alfred, getting torn up in the process. At this point, Alfred realized that Yorick was not Yorick and was clearly possessed by something. So Alfred returned to his room and locked the door by tying his belt to the door handle and to the dresser on the floor. While that was occurring, Edward listened in on a conversation between Simuel and the other symbiote and convinced Karsa to check on the other adjacent room so he could continue listening to the conversation uninterrupted. The other symbiote asked Simuel's parasite why it hadn't consumed the host, and Simuel's parasite argued that they were not supposed to consume the host, insisting that they are somehow stronger together. The other symbiote disagreed, calling Simuel's parasite a liar and insisting that they were supposed to be the only thing in this world, not the flesh bags they were meant to consume. When Simuel's parasite asked why this symbiote had called it brother, the opposing symbiote insisted that they had been sent to take this world, to soften any resistance for their master. It then asked Simuel's symbiote what it had done to that end. Simuel's parasite insisted that it had found a strong and powerful host, and the other parasite scoffed and insisted that despite this, Simuel's parasite had done nothing to further their master's goals. The opposing symbiote intended to discuss further before insisting that someone else was listening and ending the conversation by lunging at Simuel, attempting to slam a makeshift spike into Simuel's eye. Simuel shouted for everyone to join him and that the creature was in the room with him. After a brief combat, Simuel managed to land a death blow on the other symbiote. As a result, Simuel's symbiote began to consume this opposing parasite, incorporating its essence into itself and Simuel. The opposing symbiote only had time to whisper that this is not what Jubilex wanted before being consumed entirely. Alfred left his quarters, seeing that the creature had seemingly left the floor. Alfred was able to track the ichor-possessed Yorick into the armory, where Yorick was attempting to construct a combustible to destroy the ship. After being discovered, Yorick continued to attempt to sabotage the ship while slipping away from the group whenever possible, until he was finally dispatched by a vicious blow from Karsa's blade in the crew's quarters. Simuel attempted to convince his parasite to consume the third symbiote, but was unable to do so. Edward considered putting the symbiote in one of the jars given to them, but ultimately decided against it. Finally, Captain Swinford was told of the deaths among his crew, and he prepared to take stock of the damages and request assistance from those available to give it. That, in a nutshell, is what happened in episode 4. Again, apologies for the audio glitch. We're trying a new format too, so we're also expecting, some technical issues there, but nothing that should leave an entire episode, unwatchable. Anyway, I hope you enjoy the next coming episodes. I appreciate you watching. I know everyone in our group does, largely because we talk about it at least once an episode. I hope you're enjoying the show as it goes on. I hope you kind of have your own theories what's going on from where you are now, I guess, currently. So again, thanks for watching. See you later.